In this video, we're going to take a quick look at GBTC specifically. A lot of people asking questions about how GBTC, which is the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, how it works, how it follows Bitcoin, and why its price action looks the way it does. If you look on the side of my screen here, as we are recording, Bitcoin has been up as much as about $700 or $800 today. And yet GBTC has been down the entire day. I don't think that there has been a moment at all today where GBTC has been positive. And we've been in a prolonged period of time where GBTC has not been keeping up with the performance of Bitcoin. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of dynamics regarding the premium versus discount. There's a management fee. Because it's a trust, there's a lot of factors that weigh into, its price, the underlying, how it matches the underlying. A lot of people think that GBTC exactly tracks Bitcoin, and that's true to some degree. We only have one whole halving cycle, which is the last cycle that had the 2017 bull run in it. We only have the one cycle that GBTC existed from beginning to end in. So there's not a lot of evidence, there's not a lot of data to go off of, but if you really look into the pricing, and if you pay attention to GBTC's price action compared to Bitcoin, you can come to a few conclusions, but the important thing to remember is that GBTC, like any ETF, even I would say, or any fund that is supposed to track, there's no guarantees, and you have to be aware of your risks. So I don't recommend getting into GBTC, or I don't recommend allocating too much if you don't understand what it's for. Now, I will just right off the bat tell you I am invested in GBTC. I'm going to stay invested in GBTC until the Bitcoin peak, or as close to the Bitcoin peak as I can get to. Sometime between, for me, my range I would say is going to be somewhere between the months of the end of July and the end of October. And probably more likely in September. That's the way it looks to me, but obviously nobody knows. So what I have here is I'm looking at a 3-day chart, and you'll notice it's log scaled. The reason why I've log scaled it is because it's easier to see and to follow the price action here, and to follow the increases. So I have this vertical blue line here. It's showing you the halving. I have this vertical gold line, which is showing you the peak. And so what I'd like to start with is a couple of things before we get going. It's going to be, as I said, there's a lack of data, so we can't say for certain how GBTC is going to follow or not follow Bitcoin in this cycle. But there are other elements too that throw things off. We had the March 2020 crash last year, and the models broke for at least a little bit, and so it's hard to know what impact that's going to have long term on Bitcoin and on GBTC. There also Grayscale, the Bitcoin Trust, was basically, I think it was the first fund that tracked Bitcoin with a stock like this, and now there are all sorts of other funds. You have BitW, the Bitwise one, you have eBit, you have all these other, funds that are tracking Bitcoin or crypto in general, like baskets of crypto. So that also kind of throws a wrench in things. And then, right now it looks like Bitcoin is trending on a shorter cycle, so it's really hard to know exactly. With that in mind, though, let me show you kind of what I've figured out here. Following the halving, what I did was I went to the lowest point, which was around August 24th of 2016. And starting there, I tracked to the first peak, the first near-term peak. You can also do it from the halving. it took about 174 days from the halving to the first peak. And what I want you to notice as I zoom in here on this section, what I want you to notice is how from the point of that peak, it took, if I have this line here, it took 118 days for price to reach, to come to a new all-time high. And you notice too, when it did break its all-time high, its move up, this move up to the next peak was quick, 24 days, and it was 272%. All right. And then what you see happen is, you see another prolonged period where it kind of lags behind, kind of consolidates down. This one was about 75 days. And then you have about a 91% increase once the all-time high is overtaken. And that took 21 days. It's pretty incredible. And then you have in the next section, you have another, you can see here, another dipping period. And this one was about 85 days long. But then what you'll see here is once you get to the next rise, it's almost 230% up, right? And then here you have already the Bitcoin peak, right? So let's pull back. Okay, now I'm going to unlog this for a second so you can just see what happens. Boom, right? And so the point here is to understand that yes, GBTC tracks, and actually if you take from the halving to the peak, it's over 2,800%. It's the same thing in Bitcoin. Bitcoin from its halving to its peak was about 2,800%. So yes, it does track by the end of the cycle, but you have to realize that because of the nature of the premium, because of all these different circumstances, we're subject to long periods of time where GBTC is, underperforming, where price falls or is relatively flat across a range of days, and those are long periods of time. And from peak to peak, if you measure it from one peak to the next peak to the next peak to the next peak, the average is approximately 120 days. And so that's how long it takes from peak to peak, right? But then once you see the initial rise, it's very quick. It's only a matter of weeks. So what I've gathered from this, what I've noticed is that this means that if you look at the current cycle, what you could use to estimate, again, it's not certain, but what you could estimate is once you get to a near-term peak, you could average out the amount of days that it takes for these cycles to play off, right? So, and then figure out when it's probably going to retake its all-time high, or when it should. And then you can kind of measure where the next peak should be. Again, not a science, nothing certain, but that's kind of the way that I have approached looking at this. And also notice too, how many near-term peaks do we get before the main peak, before the end of the bull market cycle? 1, 2, 3. Right. So if you want to do a comparison here, well, maybe we can compare to Bitcoin during this same time, right? Let's go to a daily chart. We can kind of try to look at it that way. The chart's all messed up now. But if you look at it this way, again, you can kind of see that at times GBTC will lag, but then it'll always race to catch back up, and then it'll outperform. So during those, let me go back to my 3-day. Let me get rid of my comparison here. Once you get to those increases, once you get to those spots where GBTC starts to take over its new all-time high, it rapidly and hugely outperforms the underlying, the actual Bitcoin. So that's good to know. All right, so then let's go back. Let's go to where we are now. And things are still in progress, but you know, if we calculate this out, I've got these, and I'll go back to my log scale. If you look, I've got some lines here, and it's not certain, but you know, I'm trying to guesstimate a little bit about what's going on. But if you look, sorry, I'm getting a little mixed up here. If we start from the halving, about the halving, we had this little peak, took about 99 days. If we go from this peak to say this peak, it's 146. If we go to the second peak, which was on our kind of double, triple dip thing, then that is about 300%. And I actually draw it to this peak here at 146 days in. And the reason why is because the price action in this area is not convincing to me. It seems like it's more of a sideways motion rather than, you know, really taking off and taking the all-time high. So I don't consider it to be a significant, like, I don't see this as being like, oh, this is the third peak, so it would have been 1, 2, 3, you know, or starting from here, 1, 2. I don't consider this to be a peak. This is more like an aberration to me. But you can kind of see what I've calculated out. Look at where it's consolidating. It's right at one of my targets, one of these blue horizontal lines. So we could be floating around here for a while. I'm not saying we will, but it could be that we're floating around here for a little bit before we take off and go towards a new all-time high on GBTC. Now, I made a prediction a month ago that GBTC would be, because of the price action, would be trading at $100 by the time we got to the end of March. Well, here we are at the end of March, and I was wrong. I was expecting this, as soon as I saw this price action right here, I expected us to get up to, I mean, if we were going to follow the old price action of, you know, close to at least 90%, if not 100% moves upward in GBTC, that's what I was expecting. And when we got to here, you know, we were obviously trading close to $50. So, and then definitely we were trading over $50 here on the 17th of February. So, so that was my prediction, but obviously that was not true. But this does give you a way to look at how GBTC tracks Bitcoin. And as far as price targets go, I've got a couple of boxes here. This white box is sort of my target area. In a perfect world, in the best situation with the greatest upside, my top side target would be 704-ish, about $700. And then my low end is, you know, about 150. So I've got a very, very conservative range down here. And I've got a very high outperforming number at the top. And then my midpoint, I would say, based on the math that I've done, the sweet spot would be around 320-ish, 315, 320-ish. So if we can get, you know, if I can get somewhere in there, again, we've got kind of the lowest expectations at about 150, highest possibility at around, what did I say this was? Around 700 to 750 in that range. But I think we'll get somewhere in the low 300s. That's kind of where I'm targeting. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. Go ahead and like, subscribe if you thought that this was helpful and informative. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.